But yeah, welcome. I'm Theo, and this is Rob, and we are from Untold, Budvar's marketing agency, committed lager geeks, I think, at this point. So we've got the very real pleasure today of sharing the discussion and putting your brewing questions to our two special guests. We've got global brand ambassador for Budvar, as well as a brilliant brewer himself, Radim Zvánovec. Hopefully they have appeared. Give us a wave, guys. And the man who holds probably one of the most esteemed and envied jobs in the Czech Republic, Deputy Brewmaster from Budweiser Budvar, Petr Kosin. Yeah, we've had a wave. Hello. We'll give you a round of applause. No one else can hear you if they give you a round of applause. So yeah, you just have to have it from us.
So before we begin, thanks to all of you. We're still letting you in as you arrive. There's still a few people coming in, but you from all over the world, which is incredible. It's great to see you all here today. And before we begin, we just want to thank you for joining us for this special Budvar brewing event as part of the Year of the Lager celebration. And as you probably know, Budvar declared 2024 the Year of the Lager. And this is all about giving real lager, properly brewed, the spotlight it absolutely deserves. Lager, as you will know, is the most popular beer category in the world, but it is also perhaps the most misunderstood. As the national brewery of the Czech Republic, Budvar's mission has always been about getting great lager, properly brewed and lagered, into people's hands. And the fact that you're all here today means that you know that already that there is good lager and there is the other kind. And that, like us, you have a huge passion for the good stuff. So Budvar decided a huge part of celebrating Year of the Lager would be about helping brewers like all of you to brew a quality Czech-style lager yourself.
Yeah, and I think today is a rare opportunity. This really doesn't happen very often, to dive into the details of how you do that, how you brew great lager, and a chance to get Czech lager brewing tips from these two directly. So whether you've just started brewing, whether you haven't ever brewed before, be interested to know if there are any of you out there. And whether you've started a Year of the Lager brew, whether you haven't started it yet, we're thrilled that you're here. There's people from all over the world. Not going to do shout outs, but yeah, we would like a couple of housekeeping points. Just to remind you that you can share your brewing journey on Instagram with us once you do get started. We'll probably remind you about this again at the end. If you can tag us at Budvar Global and use the hashtag Year of the Lager, all one word. You've probably seen it once or twice in all the email communications you've been getting. So we'll be reposting and sharing those once you get off. After you're super inspired from today and get off on your brewing journey, we would love to see it. Thank you.
Yeah, so just to give a quick note on the structure for today, we've got about an hour in total, roughly. We could go a bit over, depending how deep into this we get, but we want to get right in by asking some foundational questions to these guys, and some of the many already sent in by you guys to Radim and Petr. So we'll do those, and then if these inspire further questions, or you have a question you want to ask in the course of the conversations, please direct message us on the chat here. I've already dropped a note in. Rob Cowan and Theo Cooper is here too, so you can drop either of us a direct message. And we'll endeavor to make sure that your questions get asked in the time that we have. As Theo said, you should all be muted now, and we'd just ask that you please keep it that way. If you're invited to ask a question, we'll ask you to unmute, and then you can ask the guys yourself. So let's get started. Petr, Radim, ready? Everyone got a beer? Okay, yes. I thought that might be the case. I feel like we're all going to get thirsty if we haven't. So let's. First question is for Petr. Petr, can you give us your philosophy on brewing?
Yeah, philosophy on brewing. Yeah. Well, I was fascinated by beer since the first sip of good lager, and you know, for me, beer always was like mysterious drink, and I always knew that I would like to know more about lager, and that's why I took the standard journey of university education on beer brewing. I got PhD in brewing, and And what I've learned is that the more I know about beer, the more I know that I don't know everything. That beer still keeps its secrets hidden, and so our philosophy on brewing is like to know that beer still has its secrets, and beer cannot be, let's say, managed simply by measurement and numbers, and beer is more like art than some, like, say, industrial production. And it's like the same as chef when he's cooking the meal. We know that the most important is to taste everything, and let's say to brew according to taste, because when you want to brew according to numbers, you can easily get misleaded, because you never measure, you always measure a narrow part of the beer, and you never measure everything. Yeah, like beer is really interesting, complex drink. For example, from the chemistry point of view, we know that beer isn't just a straight solution of anything that is soluble, but it is also very important. It's solution of gases, and Radim will talk about the importance of gas in the beer later. And we also know that beer is really complex colloidal solution. Yeah, when you have a look in the literature, you can find that there are, like, I don't know, maybe some sources say up to 8,000 components in beer, and all that 8,000 components would make up to the overall expression of and taste and what makes the beer. And what is interesting, majority of these compounds are not water soluble, and water, beer is, let's say, a water drink. So how is it done that you've got insoluble components that express for the taste of beer? So we know, for example, how important it is that beer is a colloidal solution. Although it is filtered, and although you can see it's clear, it's never clear enough, and you've got always particles inside the beer. And it is something what makes up for what we call inner surface of the beer, which is the surface where all these flavor compounds can be bound. And yeah, and it turns us back to whether to measure or whether to taste. You always can measure only some of that components, but majority of these compounds you even cannot measure, and you for sure cannot measure how they would express in such a complex drink as beer is. So that's why we take the journey that, this brewery, it's been here for about 130 years, and we got a philosophy that change as less as possible, and keep the beer as natural as it was in history, and let's say don't change anything because you don't know enough about the beer, and that's why we like to stick to all that what is now called tradition, how the beer was here done all the time in history, and we know that we are not smart enough to decide such important questions like to change anything on, I don't know, meshing scheme, or even to change anything about the, for example, pressure that we are cooking at during the hop boiling, and that's why we all still keep the, for example, slight oxidation in the brew house, and that's why we keep really brewing under 100 degrees centigrade with say slight under pressure that equals to the elevation we got here in Budvar. So we really we keep the beer with all its mysteries and just taste the wonderful drink, and less measure, more taste.
So taste is the key. Well, I guess that brings us on to a really important fundamental question.
Yeah, thank you for that. That was an amazing introduction. I think, yeah, I mean, back to basics then, and for either of you to answer, what are, and I know that this is a short list, but there's lots of complexity underneath it. What are the key ingredients to a great lager?
Well, as the First of all, like hello everyone, and thanks for joining. It's been great to see like a Czech lager. It's becoming super popular, and we're so glad we had so many people signing up for the year of the lager. So yeah, just to continue what Petr said, you know, it's with beers and all its mysteries. We would say like it. Let's take it down to its simplicity, the way we do it, and it's pretty much 4 ingredients. That's all we use in the beer. You know, when we talk about the water, the only way we treat our water is just using sand filtration. Yeah, there are no water adjustments when it comes to meshing and process. So keep it very simple. Obviously, we are fortunate enough to have a very pure source of water in our artesian well here underneath the Budvar brewery. When it comes to malt, you know, we can get more technical later on the stage, but you know, using high quality malt, what we use here is under modified or slightly under modified malt, which is suitable for decoction mashing. We also like try to stay away from some of different malts. So for us, we don't tend to use any caramel malts because that's based on experience. That doesn't get any great results for lager or Czech-style lager. When it comes to hops, we pretty much believe in purity, so we're using whole cones. We've experimented with some hop products, but not as far as pellets. So keep it straightforward. Obviously, everyone has different challenges. Everyone has different brew houses, well, based on what types of hops you can utilize, and following the process right. Taste, and taste. That's yeah.
Well, we keep the ingredients as simple as possible. Our lager is usually single malt, single hop, and you know there is all the taste that you need in these simple basic materials.
Fantastic, thank you guys.
Yeah. Simple and effective.
This is a bit of a hack question, but can you tell us one killer tip right off the bat, right at the beginning, one killer tip or technique that you have learned over the years that you could share with all these brewers, please?
Yeah, well, killer tip, like, you know, as chef in his kitchen, brew house is your kitchen, and that's where the taste of that simpler raw materials transfer to the taste of the beer. So our killer tip is to, let's say, don't be afraid of slight oxidation in the brew house, because it will give the beer nice golden color in a much better way that any caramel malt would do. And don't, let's say, cook in the overpressure, because again, a caramel taste would develop, and you know, smooth drinkable lager, and lager is about drinkability. So it needs just proper work in the brew house, where you know, saving on the cost of energy can destroy the taste, and our killer tip is to do the proper meshing and proper atmospheric boiling, and it will return in the taste of the beer.
Fantastic. Radim?
Yeah, speaking of taste, you know, like it takes a long time to make lager, and you know, my experience is on the dispensing side. So first, very important fact is the hygiene around dispensing, but also like many brewers don't put their carbonation specs on their beers, so it's quite essential to share the carbonation spec, because then, you know, in most of the pubs and tap rooms, all the beers are dispensed at the same pressure. So it means if your carbonation is 5 grams per liter, you don't calculate your carbonation right, that probably will result in the customers and, you know, all the guests not tasting the beer that the brewer intended. So really focus on retaining the carbonation, and also the way you're dispensing beer. So some of you seen things that we've done about dispensing, and how your Czech lagers are dispensed in a very signature way. So don't be afraid of the foam. Foam brings the texture of the beer, also keeps the beer fresher. So yeah, retain the carbonation and pour the beer in best hygienic way, with some foam on the top. That always helps.
Amazing. Yeah, well, there's that age-old Czech expression: the brewmaster makes the beer the brewmaster brews the beer, but the beer tender Vychepny makes it. I think, is that right? Have I got that right? You've got to pour the beer right. And maybe that's something we'll come back to later on. But yeah, what we're going to jump into now, and I think so. The way these next few questions are going to work, we've got we've worked with the guys in advance to select from some of the amazing questions which have come from people all over the world. It's a mixture of home brewers and professional brewers, and I know we've got both in the audience. So hopefully there'll be something for everyone in here. If you are here when we ask your question, hopefully most of you are, feel free to drop into the chat if there's anything you'd like to ask to get us to ask. We probably won't open up the conversation in this section, and then once we've got these sections, these sort of 5, 6, 7 questions done, we're going to open it up to the floor, and then questions can come in. First of all, through the chat. So just you can ask questions, direct message to Rob, who you'll find, Rob Cowan, on the list.
We've already had one here. Very good one.
One's already come in. It's extremely technical. So yeah, we will have an open Q&A after this. Anyway, I believe I have seen Mikko here from Finland, I think, in the list of attendees. So welcome, Mikko. So Mikko had actually quite a few questions, and we've kind of narrowed it down a little bit, and some of them are going to be answered elsewhere. So this is from a homebrew perspective, possibly for you, Radim, or for either of you. There's a sense of this question about the equation, but we're jumping straight into the weeds here. But the equation for decoction, and then there's also a question about grain bill. Is this where you'd like to show the diagram?
Yeah, you can share it.
You can definitely share it. I would say maybe if we want to kick it off, like we've already covered the grain composition. Pretty much for us, the standard is using a lager malt, slightly modified. Monocol back index is around 32, 34.
Yeah, under 38. Yeah.
Under 38, so it's quite essential. And then when it comes to decoction, using the same equation, calculate the amount that you go to draw away and return it after you go through all the steps, boil it and return it back. So if you can show that, and Petr can describe the decoction, and we can describe the equation. The equation is very simple.
That's let me try and find this for you now. Hang on one moment. This is the smoothest modern technology. Okay. Maybe not the absolute.
If you want to start it, describe the process of temperatures and how it continues.
Okay. We'll wait for the picture.
It's possibly okay. Is it that one first?
Oh well, I will skip to the diagram to the next slide.
The next slide.
Okay, no problem. Oops.
There we go. Okay.
the easy one. Yeah.
Questions about the details on the decoction. Yeah. Well, so what our brew house is equipped for, and what we do, let's say for all of our products, is we do the double decoction meshing scheme. In its, let's say, longest and the most traditional way. Again, as I said, like, don't change anything that you don't understand. So that's why we never change this. And we are still meshing in at 37 degrees centigrade. We know that there are some, let's say, questions about the foam stability when doing this. Well, we never measured any significant difference in this topic, and so that's why we do the cold meshing in for the phytase to work. And then we add hot water to get to the proteolytic temperature, which is quite standard. And then we start with separation of mesh. And then there was a question, let's say, what is the equation and how to calculate the size of the mesh. So the size of this mesh, we are calculating to achieve the exact temperature after return of the mesh to the back of the rest. So we are calculating the size of the mesh for the, as you see in the second half of the diagram, that's 65 degrees centigrade that is there. It's just 65, the lower saccharification temperature. We are calculating the size of the mesh to achieve the exact temperature that we want to achieve, and the exact temperature is for us different for each beer brand that we are doing here in the brewery. We've got brands where we are targeting for higher attenuation, and for these higher attenuation brands, we have slightly lower mesh size, because after return we are targeting to around 64 degrees centigrade. And for the lower attenuation brands, where we want to have, let's say, lower alcohol, we have slightly larger mesh size, because after return we are targeting to like 67, and this difference 64 versus 67 for us, it makes like, I don't know, 5 to maybe 7% of final attenuation, and so this is how we decide about the mesh size. So it's not let's say like 1/3. It is always calculated based on the temperature after return. And what is important for us there is really the 100 degrees centigrade for the mesh boiling, because it is the point where we know that the grains are being like mechanically destroyed, and as I was talking about the inner surface of beer, and where the surface for the taste is being developed, we know it is there. So it is important for some let's say direct taste development, the taste of, let's say, boiling and cooking, but also lager that has been meshed by decoction. It is said to be fuller in body, and what does fuller body mean? It's not always, let's say, it doesn't need to mean that you've got a higher residual extract. It can mean much more, and for us it means that it is really fuller in any taste, and it is fuller because the beer has, let's say, higher inner surface, and it has more ability for the flavors to be bound and to be expressed during tasting.
Wow, that's I can't say I personally understood absolutely all of that, but I think I think lots of people here were nodding very enthusiastically. In fact, a couple of the questions that have already been asked were answered by just looking at that chart, apparently. So yeah, we're giving some gold information out there with that. Thank you very much to both of you. Let's should we get rid of this chart now? We're done. Yeah, cool.
Be done, yeah.
So let's jump into the next question.
Just one thing there, it would be worth to mention that if you guys sign up for the golden rules, that was part of the year the lager. This mesh schedule is there, but also there's the equation to follow how to calculate the right amount of the decoction draw that you want to boil to achieve the specific temperature.
Yeah, but you always need to adjust to your specific brew house, because every brew house is slightly different thermal capacity. And it doesn't work just like simple as is there. You always should recalculate on some offset that your brew house has.
And maybe worth to mention as well is the technical capacities of the brew houses. Not every brew house is equipped for decoction meshing, but we also described there are some approaches that we sort of experienced while we brewed with different breweries over the past years. So doing something like a reverse decoction meshing, where you mesh all into the kettle, and then you actually calculated the amount that is left in there in the kettle, and then send it onto MCV. So it's yeah.
You've got options
about that, but it's all described in the golden rules as well.
Yeah. I think hopefully everyone knows what the golden rules are, but if you are hearing the golden rules and you're not sure what they are, that is the guidebook that we've put together for part of Year of the Lager, which is available from the page where most of you would have signed up to attend this webinar. So I expect you've all got it, but yeah, let's move on to question 2.
Yeah, this is from Sam at Firestone. Hi, welcome, Sam. How and when do you acidify your mash/wort to hit the brew house pH targets?
Yeah, well, It is something that many brewers don't believe, but we are not acidifying. We are not using any acids, like we are not acidifying.
Acidifying. Yeah.
Acidifying, yes, sorry.
I don't know either.
Acidifying.
We don't
You got
like-
close. Yeah.
we just leave it to the nature. Yeah, we know we've got maybe slightly higher pH that are set in the literature, but we never cared. Like, you know, first brewmaster here, he worked just with thermometer and maybe some saccharometer and maybe later with microscope, but you never actually really needed pH measurement in the brew house because the nature does it by itself. Yeah, we know that why brewers are doing it to let's say hit the most optimal pH optimum of amylases, but you know, brewing isn't just about amylases, and for us adding acid always changes the taste of the beer, and it is something what definitely changes the taste of raw materials and changes, let's say, maybe kind of unifies the beer of the lager and doesn't let's say all the wonderful flavors of the malts to express. So that's why we don't do it.
I think what just worth to mention, so sort of answer the question as well, is like the ranges of pH that we do at the meshing in, and then after the end of boil, and then at the 5% attenuation at the fermentation, and also at the other lagering. But depending on the products, usually it would be around 6 pH at the meshing stage, and then at the end of the boil is around that 5.7, 5.6. Yeah, and it goes through fermentation. It gets down to 4.7. So it's quite higher pH compared to most other beer styles. So one thing that I learned from Petr was saying that the Czech lager actually has a higher finishing pH, but that's something what could contribute to the fuller body in the beer.
And definitely to the flavor profile. Yeah.
Wow, thanks, guys.
This kind of detailed technical information really is amazing. Exactly what I think everyone's here for. In fact, Sam himself has dropped in. I'm guessing must be some strange time of day over there if you're in the States. But he says thanks very much for that answer, and we will move on to Chris, who is from Black Rocks Brewery. So another full scale brewery with this one. Chris had some questions about pH, which I think we've answered. But he also wants to say, do you have any recommended specific decoction schedules to share? Should we start? Let's start with that one because it's a two-part question.
That's what we've just shared. So
do you think that's we've fully answered that one already? Yeah. Okay. And the second one is
fermenting. Yeah,
I can't see it. If I'm fermenting in a standard conical fermenter, at what point during fermentation, brackets percentage of attenuation, would you transfer to a horizontal lagering tank and begin spunding?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't give you any recommendation on the attenuation because it all depends on the fermentability of your wort. Yeah? As I was discussing the decoction scheme, so it is where we work on the, let's say, achievable attenuation of the beer. Yeah? And for beers that have higher achievable attenuation, we definitely go with higher fermentation degree to the cellar. Usually, we leave like 5% of the final
extract.
Not extract, but fermentation degree. Yeah, like the final 5% of fermentation degree we leave to the cellar. Like 95 of the fermentation degree. 95% is done on the main fermentation. It is really important and good question. Yeah, it is important to keep this quite exact because when you go with too much extract to be fermented in the cellar, you can result in a beer that is not fully fermented and that can suffer from diacetyl, for example. On the other side, when you leave too less extract to be fermented in the cellar, you risk, for example, some acetaldehyde of flavors. Yeah, so that's why this is something that we measure and we keep quite strict at 5 percent left for the lager cellar.
Okay, great.
Amazing. Yeah, I'm not sure if he's actually in the chat here, but Sam has reassured us that he is awake. It's very early in California, but he's got a coffee. So
There you
yeah.
go. You go. It's not a lager, but it's pretty close.
Too early for a lager.
Yeah.
Next question.
Next question is one asked by Marek and Christian, actually. Hi, guys. I think you're both in. And it is, at which moment do you sponge your pressured vessel so the beer carbonates naturally? And how do you do it?
Well, basically, after transfer to the cellar, we leave like, I don't know, 2 days for the tank, for the vessel to, let's say, kind of calm down. We let the first gases that are being developed there, we leave them out. And then after, let's say, from the third day, we set the pressure to the tank, and we are targeting that, as Radim was talking, that 5 grams per liter of CO2. So for our lagers vessels, it would be like, I don't know, from 0.3 to 0.6 bars, because we've got different sizes of the lager vessels. Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
Great. And the next one, I know, yeah, Marek and Christian, if you're here, let us know if you need to follow up on that one. By the way, guys, we've got a few more of these to go, but if you do want to get ahead of asking any questions for the open Q&A part of today, feel free to message them to Rob directly. We've got 1 or 2, or just put them in the chat. We're not too fussy. Anyway, so this one is from Bernard. Bern. I'm sorry, I'm saying your name wrong. Strail. I've seen him in the chat, so welcome. So this is a question about diacetyl, which you've already mentioned. So let's go. Diacetyl can be a style in Czech lagers. How do you get that desired level and maintain it? And what are sure ways to get rid of diacetyl if you don't want it or you don't want too much of it?
So pretty much like I know there is if you're following like BJCP guidelines or BA guidelines, diacetyl is quite it's described there as desirable at low levels. But you know what we believe in Budvar, that we really don't like diacetyl here. We're not fans of diacetyl. We like a clean beer. So yeah, there is a strict no from us for diacetyl. I know that some other great Czech breweries have diacetyl in their beer, but in general, like diacetyl can be measured, the levels of diacetyl, and if you want to play with that, you can go that way. But for us, it's pretty much we say no to diacetyl. Keep it clean.
Well, personally, I don't believe anybody likes it, like even in Czech-style lager. For us, how to maintain the low level. Again, back to the killer tip. For us, it's about the decoction regime. Yeah, it is there in the brew house where we set the target attenuation of our beer. Yeah, so we are decocting to have that desired attenuation degree. If it's lower, we can adjust the meshing scheme. And then there is about the last question. It is about letting the exact extract to the cellar, and to be sure that the beer is fully fermented. Because if you, for example, are meshing in a way that attenuation degree would be higher, the fermentability would be higher, and then you don't want that alcohol level in your beer, and you are slowing the fermentation by temperatures, and you are interrupting the fermentation before it really would naturally end by fully fermentation. It is where you risk the diacetyl. So well, and maybe again back to what to measure. We don't measure diacetyl in our laboratory. We've got quite well equipped laboratory, but we don't measure diacetyl. It is maybe interesting to anybody. We are just tasting that it's not there.
Okay, yeah, absence of diacetyl. So yeah, we've talked a lot about decoction, and I think you actually touched on this in one of your answers earlier, Radim. But specifically, this is a question about home brewing and decoction, and I know there's some good stuff in the golden rules there, which I think you kind of mentioned earlier about different approaches you can take to decocting. But Bernd says, as a home brewer, I've tried decoction several times, but I never get much luck getting significant flavor change. So is there a key from a sort of homebrew perspective to good decoction? And does the material of the pot that you're using for decocting matter? How vigorous does it need to be boiled? Yeah, let's talk a little bit about decoction in a homebrew context, if you can.
Yeah, so pretty much it's straightforward, right? The first thing is the selection of malt, because then if you're using well modified malt and you're using decoction in home scale, you're probably going to end up with quite thin beer. So that's one thing to consider. Also the type of malts, like again in the golden rules, there are commercial examples. Even it's not only for professional brewers, those commercial examples, but it's also for home brewers as well. So using that, when it comes to decoction, it's again calculating the right amount and following the same schedule. Yeah, even like I tried brewing a decoction style of beer at home, and I had a great examples. Like I still do 20 minutes boil in the decoction, by the way. Yeah, that amount of time that you boil as well, and I found a significant difference. So again, if the ingredients are right, the calculations are right, and the temperature and time is right, it makes difference. I know you can also, like in a home brewing scale, sort of like substitute a grain bill with other types of grains. But again, if you want to like hit the style of Czech-style lager right, then again follow what we shared with and try to have a go. We did some videos with the guys from Mold Miller. I see Martin sitting there. Yeah, that's hello Martin. So yeah, follow that as well, and there are quite some solid videos on YouTube on how to do it with the flavor comparison as well.
Okay, so there is hope for home brewing.
Well, I just stop you
Yeah.
there, because Eduardo has just sent in a question related to that.
Mhm.
He says, "Hello guys, I do triple decoction on a regular basis. 3 decoctions for 15 minutes, 45 minutes in total. I use Bohemian floor malt, and the beer is awesome, but I want to get a more amber color. Do you think that I can use more time during decoction or use Vienna or Munich malts as part of the grist? Thank you."
Yeah, well, 100 minutes, it was probably the boiling time. Yeah. I wouldn't be afraid. I don't know how your brew house looks like, but for example, how do we fine tune the golden tone of the color? Is by letting the wort to, let's say, meet oxygen in the brew house. So we've got 2 options on the transfer between vessels. We've got option to use the top piping, where we get some aeration, or the bottom piping, and we are choosing this according to the malt batch color, yeah, because a batch to batch variation is there. And the same is, for example, for lautering. Yeah, we got still the possibility to use open ways of lautering, and we know that this open way of lautering, the classical valves for open lautering, it adds like, I don't know, 0.8 EBC units in color. Yeah, the top piping, it also adds like half EBC of color. So it is something that maybe is worth of trying.
It's interesting if you get to the English brewing books, they will tell you to like avoid any hot side aeration, but it's something that we've been using it for quite some years. And
yeah, well, and you know, the usual question is that doesn't it, let's say, harm your flavor stability of finished products? So for us, no, it's like there is no difference in flavor stability when doing this. And it is, let's say, you know, there is it's a philosophical question. Let's say, if there is a compound in your beer that can be oxidized, for us, it is better to oxidize it before fermentation, because yeast would repair the beer. And then this compound for oxidation isn't there after fermentation. So it's like, you know, there have been many studies, and many studies have been, let's say, misunderstood the analytical technique that has been used. Like many of them were, let's say, beer flavor oriented and focused.
Well, Eduardo says, "Thank you very much, guys. I'm going to try this. I'm a home brewer."
And Bernd also replied to say, Thanks. He thinks probably his problem was with the malt being too modified in response to what you said, Radim. So that's great. We've got one more question on here.
We've got a question asking if you can just say what you just said in Spanish, but I'm guessing the answer is no. So we have one more question for you before we open up to any other questions. But this one is from the Nomadic Brewer, and I think it's a big question. It's always the question we end up asking and answering for people when we're talking about lager. But what is the ideal maturation time, guys?
Yeah, well, one of the tough questions. For us, we are lucky that this brewery in the history it met only managers who really enjoyed good tasting lager and never were afraid of investing in lagering capacities. And so, you know, and we know that there are not that lucky brewers to have that high lagering capacities. So for us, it is like, you know, at least 2 months of lagering is something what we can easily do, even in the high season. And when we are tasting the beer throughout the maturation, we know that there are batches for which like 1 month would be enough, but not all the batches. And you know, the beer never behaves, let's say, the same, and from, let's say, various reasons. And for us, to let the beer to mature that long, it is a, let's say, security way of maintaining quality. And we know that after that longer time, there is no risk of any, let's say, unfermented flavor. And you know, as we were discussing, working in the brew house, not every malt batch is the same, and not always every temperature is kept to the exact 1 degree centigrade. So we know that we are producing batches with slightly different fermentability, and the longer time for us is, let's say, security, when it's easy for us, and because we've got the capacity. So it's like, I think that when you work really exactly in the brew house, no matter whether the outside temperature is -5 or +30, and you are able to keep everything exact, and fermentation degree on the transfer to the cellar, you can keep really exact. Shorter time, like 1 month, can be good. Even shorter can be good, but it's never, let's say, secure.
Yeah, it goes back also to that the philosophical answer that Petr said at the beginning: taste, 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 and taste.
Yeah. Is there anything you might add from a kind of homebrew perspective, Radim? Is there like a happy medium that people can aim for lagering
Honestly,
time?
you know, I wish there was an answer for a specific amount of days, but like the philosophy goes even into home brewing. So taste the beer as you go, and you know, make sure.
Probably as long as you can for that security, then I guess that Petr was talking
Correct.
about. Yeah. Okay, fantastic. Well, we'll just to sort of punctuate this moment to say that we are open for questions now. So those are all the questions that we were definitely going to ask. We've actually still got loads that we can ask, but I think obviously we just want to make sure that anyone who's here, and there's quite a lot of you, there's over 70. We've had a few come and go, so there's been nearly 100 people in and out so far, which is amazing. If any of you that are here want to ask us anything, then drop a DM into Rob. We can actually at this point open up. We're still letting people in, which is kind of crazy. We can open you up to ask on camera as well.
We've got a question from Marek. Guys, for how long should I hold protein rest so I don't lose foam forming proteins?
Yeah, well, you know, you should try it with your brew house, and for us, it is like we keep the protein rest for 20 minutes. We tested whether there would be some influence on the foam stability, and there never was. So it is quite long time, and I mean, never saw that there would be an influence, or maybe there could be some slight, but the benefit of having the protein rest for us was much higher than there would be benefit of having slightly higher foam stability. And you know, beer foam is really interesting for us because you know, we never actually met beer that would be really that low in foam positive components, that you wouldn't be able to create good foam when you work as good as Radim works with his tap and with the cleaning of the glassware and so on. You know, foam stability is always a fight between foam positive components and foam negative components. And we know that there is always quite sufficient amount of foam positive components, and when you are having issues with foam, I would recommend focusing on foam negative components if there is any, let's say, chance of lowering your foam stability in this by foam negative components.
Also, not to mention is that the unmodified malt has it's got a higher percentage of protein suitable for that protein rest. That some of the more modified malts actually you don't have to do the protein rest. So
we've got a question about unmodified malt. Actually, Bernd is back, and I can see you there. Hello. Wants to know. I mean, this is whether or not this is a question you can answer, but do you have any suggestions for sources of unmodified malt that are accessible to home brewers in Europe, especially Germany? I mean, I know we've got Malt Miller in the UK here on the call, you've already mentioned, but any suggestions there, Radim or Petr?
In general, the maltsters that we've put in the golden rules are the Weirman, the Bohemian floor malted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He said, sorry, there is a follow-up that says big maltsters like Weirman, the Kolbach range is 36 to 42, even for Bohemian floor malts. Does that sound right? Or?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, so that would work. That
would work for decoction, but again, that's 20 minutes rest.
But you can try Czech malt. Yeah. Well, I don't know how is it if.
It comes from Czech Republic, the Weirman floor malted.
It's
Bohemian floor malted malt.
It's from Benešov.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Brilliant.
Good. Well, we're getting some real.
We've got another question. This is from Mikkel Rasmussen. Any recommendations for yeast that you guys can give?
Golden rules again. We've actually named some of the labs that actually are having the same yeast strain as we are using, based on the partnership brewing that we're doing with other breweries. We had a good results with the white labs, the WLP 802, which we've tested.
Yeah, well, it is our yeast strain, and let's say it makes wonderful, smooth, kind of rounded lager. But you know, for example, using W34 also can make nice lager, which would be maybe more pronounced in the terms of flavor of your raw materials. We know our lager yeast kind of round the flavor and maybe don't let the flavors of the raw materials to express as much as W34 would do, but it is part of our lager flavor, and we love it.
It's very signature flavor for the Budvar strain.
Yeah, I mean, I always when I learned that essentially the Budvar yeast strain was available, I thought that was an amazing opportunity for homebrewers brewing lager. I've got just before we jump into that one, Rob, because we were talking about Bohemian, I suppose, and we've got questions from Germany, and we were talking about buying malt in Germany. There's a question we were discussing earlier before the call. This one came in from Gus, so I'm not sure if you're here, Gus. But does a German Pils characterize as a Czech style, or can you speak a little bit to the difference between German Pils and Czech style lager, please?
So I think there's more question towards the style guidelines. So German Pils does not categorize it as a Czech style lager. But also, like German Pils come from northern Germany, where the water is quite hard in the north, and it's got lots of sulfates in it. So that could support a little bit of the bittering side of the beer. But also German Pils is more on a higher bitter side, paler color, much more lighter body. So if someone asks me like what's the difference between a Czech lager and the German Pils, it's the Czech lager tends to be more full. It has the decoction because many of the German brewers went away from the decoction. So the decoction translates into those melanoidins flavors, like lots of breadiness that stays on your palate, versus the German Pils could be more on a thinner side of the body, where the malt is not as pronounced as in Czech-style lager.
Yeah. Also about the pH would be much different because Germans like to lower their pH. We don't like to. Yeah, well, fitting beer to the style is always, let's say, difficult question. I've seen style descriptions where our beer wouldn't be Czech-style lager. Yeah, so it's like
Okay, yeah.
But I think I can say the joke that even our brewmaster says like we are much more closer to German Hellas than
yeah.
Okay, that is interesting. Okay, I've never heard that one. We've got a fairly technical looking question come up there.
This is where my technical knowledge definitely stops. But
I think you guys have got it.
Okay, this. I'm going to read it to you straight. So if there's anything you don't understand here, if I centrifuge a lager instead of the natural procedure of maturation, which is in the phase of cold crash, will this lead in a product in the BBT with unpleasant flavor aromas?
Well, it depends on how your fermentation went and how deep you were with your or how close you and with your final attenuation. Yeah, it can taste under fermented, but maybe maybe you could do the main fermentation in a way that it would work. Well, we've never tried.
Okay.
Well, we know the lagering, it is also one of the mysteries of yeast. Yeast can do different tastes depending on the conditions, and it is always interesting that the same yeast would do a really kind of weird tasting profile in the end of main fermentation, and the same yeast would do the wonderful taste after lagering. And when we have a look, there is, let's say, some significant differences. For example, the CO2 content during the fermentation. So in lager cellar, we know that yeast is in the environment of higher CO2, and as CO2 is involved in many of the metabolic pathways, it definitely can influence the metabolic paths that the yeast turn on and turn off. And so let's say we know that there is a lot that we don't know about yeast metabolism, but definitely the conditions that the yeast get in the cellar leads to the wonderful taste of lager. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Another follow-up question from Sam. He's woken up now. He's had his coffee, and he's got a question. Says, is your decoction mash kettle steam or fire heated? And do you have any tips for the differences between the two types of heating?
Yeah, well, our is steam heated. Yeah, and yeah, well, definitely the construction of your kettle influence the taste a lot. Yeah. How much burns you get there during the boiling definitely influences the taste, and it is about, let's say, any subtle change can change the taste profile of your beer. For example, we tested even, let's say, 1 degree centigrade difference at the boiling temperature, depending on the pressure, significantly changed the taste of the batches that we were, let's say, testing. So as I said in the beginning, we are boiling at like 99 point, I don't know, 2 to 99.56 degrees centigrade, because we are at about 400 meters above the sea level. And we know that even closing the door of our kettle and increasing the temperature by half a degree centigrade can be recognized in the taste.
It's also not to mention that we're still doing the 90 minutes boil, so the contact time with the elements are quite longer.
Yeah.
Because many of the craft breweries or modern breweries, they actually focus on the evaporation rate, so they would keep it around that 6% evaporation rate, and that actually you get that flavor difference like on the time spent on the heating elements as well. So
Okay.
try trying
Well,
to do.
Amazingly, we've still got people joining. I think we're probably going to look to wrap up fairly soon, but we have just had
A couple more
had a
questions.
question here about malt. I think Rob here, I'm not sure whether a home brewer or professional, has asked about a malt called Prosjov. I've just received an order of Prosjov malt. Do you feel that this
Prosjov.
is similar to Viaman floor malt? Do you know this malt? Do you have any question? Any
I've never heard of that.
Prostojov?
Prostějov.
Oh.
Yeah, well, yeah, well,
Prostojov. So that's what I meant.
It was in the pronunciation,
yeah,
obviously.
That's what I said, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, wonderful malt factory. We love their malt. So we definitely can do wonderful lager with their malt.
Okay.
Good. And the second part of that question was, does anyone in the US, and maybe anybody on this chat can drop this into the chat, but does anybody in the US have a good source for whole cone Saaz hops? And so there you go.
Bohemia hop. That's do they export? There's actually there would be a question for our the guys from Czech Republic, the Bohemia hop. I know they do also work in the US, but not entirely sure if they actually exporting the whole cones.
Well, if anyone in the chat can help Rob out before we wrap up, I'm sure he'd mightily appreciate it.
Just be sure that you can separate the spent hops properly after the hop boil. And we've got special equipment in our brew house to do the separation of spent hops.
Okay, talking about hops, we've just got a question here from Stefano. Greetings from Panama City. There you go, Panama City. Could you share your hopping schedule during the boil, please? Thank you for sharing your knowledge and experience for today.
Yeah, well, a quite easy tradition. The first part of hops, about 1/3, would be added during the lautering, during filling of the kettle, and it makes, let's say, wonderful cover that closes the kettle. And so it is the first part. Second part we add, let's say, after start of the boil, and second and the last part we add like I don't know, half an hour before the end of the boil. Yeah. So it's quite traditional scheme in 3 steps.
I think we're going to do, thank you. We're going to do one final call for questions, but I think we're going to start wrapping things up. I mean, you guys have given us so much gold here. Oh, Miko's back. Hang on. Okay. A follow-up question. Before he goes skiing. Okay. Well, all right for some. Okay.
Very nice. Yeah.
So, when drawing the decoction, is it mostly fluid, mostly grain, or 50-50?
This is a question that Chris Pithy had as well.
Okay. Does that make sense to you guys? Mostly fluid, mostly grain, or 50-50 when you're drawing the decoction?
Yeah, I think this is more maybe homebrew focused question.
Yeah.
Honestly, like in the brew house we're using pump, so there's no separation.
Yeah.
And yeah, definitely if you're using pump, or if you're drawing because I think that the question is based on like you always use the thick portion. Well,
but it is a little bit thicker than 50-50. It would be like, I don't know, 60-40. We are turning off the agitation before we start separation the mesh, so it is a little bit thicker.
Now we've had somebody's jumped into the chat to help Rob with his hops question. Should we read that out just in case it's helpful to anyone else?
Yeah.
So we've got
Martin's message saying, have you tried Bartas? They supply in the EU, so they are available. Enough demand should get you help you get them in the US, or perhaps Yakima Valley due to their connection with Bartas. And maybe that's a good suggestion. I think so.
Marek, no, I'm kind of amazed. I'm slightly concerned a couple of people might have got the time wrong. There's one thing that we've had,
just to reassure everybody who is just joining, this whole webinar, this whole event will be available to watch again in full on YouTube. So you don't need to worry if you are just joining. You can watch the whole thing.
Yeah, you will be. But if you've got a burning question and you've just joined, we may have time. We'll be uploading it and it'll be publicly available on YouTube. But anyone who signed up, which all of you have, will get a link by email as well to watch it from probably Monday. So
maybe one answer to the hops, like in the US.
Yeah.
Bear in mind it's quite important to make sure it's a Czech Saaz, because you can also get a Saaz that is grown in Germany. So
Good point.
yeah, ask your supplier the specific question.
Yeah,
about it.
okay, great. There's one question that Gus Simone has shared a link about brewing Czech lager that he's written. It's in Portuguese. So if we've got any Portuguese gang here, then feel free to have a look in the chat and read that article. Looks like it's pretty in depth.
Yeah.
There's a question we've been asked a lot on social media in particular, but actually from quite a few people who've been here today about glassware. So we'll address this one. You guys don't necessarily need to. We've got obviously the Budvar iconic glassware is a thing of beauty. There's actually a film about
There you go.
how it was made on the website and how it was designed by the artist Ronnie Plessel. Again, that's going to be bad pronunciation. But yeah, obviously you can buy it at the brewery. Radim has said the best place to try and get glassware, if you ever get the opportunity to go to a tasting or an event that Budvar are running, there's usually glassware available there, and they're quite keen to give out samples and freebies for people who are keen on it. The specific glassware that goes with the Year of the Lager beer, that was a collab brewed beer with Mikela, we've had a lot of questions about. The only place you're going to see that again will be the Mikela beer celebration in May. So I know we have some professional brewers here who are part of that celebration, and we're looking forward to seeing you there. But yeah, so we will have that glassware that was a one-off special edition there, but it isn't available for sale. So I'm sorry about that. Come and join us in Copenhagen though, and drink some beer from it. And there's going to be a huge amount of amazing lager at that event.
And I think as a great roundup question, really to close this down, but this is from Chloe, and I love this. It's a hard one, guys. So appreciate it. It might not be that easy to answer straight away, but the question is, if you could drink one lager for the rest of your life, what would it be? Radim first, maybe?
It's hard for us to not to be biased, but today in the brewery, I've actually tasted our fresh hop 16 degrees Plato lager made with fresh sauce, and you know that's the beer that you can actually only taste in the brewery. So yeah, that for me that cuts it. But obviously our original, that's staple lager that I grew up on. So yeah, it's hard not to be biased, to be honest.
You got it.
It's okay to be biased.
Any secret Budvar favorites that you've got, Petr, or are you just going with original?
Yeah, well, it's a really difficult question. Like, what a life would it be? Well, there are so many wonderful beers in the world. Yeah, but for example, one of, let's say, our original lager, and we've also got, let's say, slightly lighter version of our lager here, which would be Templeto. It is quite universal beer that you can drink from the morning till the evening. So
we love that one. We've tried that one in the brewery. I have to say, I mean, you know, anyone who hasn't visited as a brewer, we've been fortunate to visit the brewery many times, but I think if you're a brewer, visiting the Budvar brewery is an absolute must. The tour there, some of the beers that you get to try, as Radim's just said, seeing some of the things that have been discussed today, like that capacity in the cellar, and how that all works, I just think is a real kind of a life-changing experience for any beer aficionado, and certainly any brewer. There's a lot you can learn from one of those tours. So we are about to wrap things up. Yeah, nothing. Martin agrees. Nothing like tasting beers in the cellars at Budvar, especially the Reserve, which is basically what Radim's just said. And yeah, Reserve can be harder to come by, so it's a good place to go and try that. I think we would like to say a huge thanks to both of you, and I'm sure we've got lots of nice comments here saying the same thing. People are saying they've learned a lot. I think there's been a really deep amount of technical information today, but also it's been accessible, and I haven't been completely overwhelmed with the science. So we'd like to extend a huge thank you. We've got loads of thanks flooding in. Like we said, this is going to be available online for anyone to watch from Monday. And we want to say, I mean, just before we do our sort of sign off, is there anything you feel like you haven't said that you wanted to say, or are you guys feeling confident?
Any message for these brewers taking part in Year of the Lager, guys?
Yeah. Honestly, like from my point of view, like seeing how popular the Czech-style lager is getting, and you know, we would like to welcome you in the brewery. Please come and see us, come and taste the brewery, because you know, having a webinar with Petr and getting all the knowledge is brilliant. you know, tasting the product in its original destination. I think that's a lifetime experience, as you said. So yeah, thanks guys for joining, and yeah, we would love to see you in the brewery.
Yeah,
Famously, yeah. Go on,
Always
Petr.
welcome.
Great.
Yeah, famously, the beer writer Pete Brown said that he had to be dragged out of the beer at the Budvar cellars.
He said he left his fingernails on the door.
Yeah. Yeah, I think what we want to say, obviously, on behalf of these two, and we're still letting people in. Hello, Fernando. You've just joined. The video is going to be online from Monday. So yeah, good luck with the brewing. Obviously, the purpose of hopefully why almost all of you are here is to try brewing. So the next step from here, if you haven't started already, is to get stuck in, get some of that unmodified malt, and try brewing a Czech-style lager with all of the information that you've had from today, everything that's in the golden rules, and good luck with it. And I think, crucially, from our perspective, what we would love to see, and what Budvar would love to see, is you sharing that journey. So there's nothing formal. There's no kind of major requirements. We don't need to see any particular sort of style of you doing this. We would just love to see some photos. We would love to see you all having a go, and just tell us what you've done, and tag at Budvar Global if you do share anything online, and please use hashtag Year of the Lager. And
yeah, and we'll see you on Instagram.
And there's plenty more to come. I mean, Year of the Lager is going through the whole of this year. So stay tuned on the Budvar Global Instagram for more announcements and more real Czech lager, the good kind, not the other stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. At Budvar Global. Yeah, that's right, Gus. We'll pop it in the chat now and the hashtag. Thanks very much. Okay, we're going to say goodbye then. We're going to close this off. Literally, thanks for streaming in. So thank you, guys. Na zdraví. Yeah.
Thanks, Petr.
All
Thanks,
right.
Radim. Brilliant.